Hello, everybody, and welcome to this final webinar of the year, an interview with Stan Sthanunathan about his exciting new book, AI for Marketing and Product Innovation. Hi, Stan.
Hey, Ray, how are you?
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the book and the thinking behind it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And so first, it's always horrible for someone to sit through an introduction. So Stan, it's your chance to sit through this. Stan joined Unilever in 2013 as Executive Vice President of Consumer and Market Insights as Chief Provocateur. I love that phrase. Definitely a nuisance maker and a thought maker. He heads up the insights function globally and is based in London. Prior to joining Unilever, he was Vice President of Marketing Strategy and Insights at the Coca-Cola company in Atlanta, heading up the function on a global basis. And for many of us in the market research world, this is probably where Stan first came to international prominence as somebody who would say the unthinkable and challenge people to do things in a different way. Some of his many external affiliations include being a board member at the Advertising Research Foundation, the ARF. He was also the chairman of the Online Data Quality Council at the ARF, lectured at Insights at the Sloan Business School, Yale, University of Wisconsin, and is a patron and fellow of the Market Research Society. So welcome, Stan.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray.
And your book is available now, I believe.
Yeah, it is available in the US right now, and it's available for pre-order on amazon.co.uk, and it's around the same time it will be available in India, Australia, and Singapore, other places also. But right now, it's available only in the US Amazon store.
Super. And we're going to run through various questions. And the first one is, I see that you've got co-authors. So can you tell us a bit about the other two authors and why the three of you wrote this book?
Okay, let me give a brief introduction to the other two co-authors. Dr. A.K. Pradeep, he's a serial entrepreneur. He founded NeuroFocus at one point of time, which was subsequently bought over by Nielsen. And his latest venture is a company called Machine Vantage, which is all around AI and machine learning. And that's when we got to work together on how to leverage that technology for the benefit of Unilever. And Andrew Apple is also an investor in Dr. Pradeep's company, and he's the CEO of IRI worldwide, and he's based out of the US. Now, the next question is, why did the three of us get together? Essentially, what happened was, we've been dabbling with AI for quite some time at Unilever, 4 years to be precise. And we've tried all kinds of technologies, and at any point of time, there are at least 20, 30 experiments going on. But one experiment that kind of got a lot of people in Unilever interested was how to apply AI and machine learning in the area of mining qualitative information, not just structured data, but also qualitative information. And that led us to unearthing a bunch of trends that were there, that were spotted even before they were manifesting in the marketplace. And in that context, we were working with Dr. Pradeep's company, Machine Vantage. And that's when we realized that, okay, listen, the scope of machine learning and AI is actually way beyond just structured data. So we said, okay, it might be worthwhile, given the nascent nature of this whole field, it might be worthwhile documenting what is the world of possible with AI and machine learning, not just from a structured data, but also from an unstructured data. And that's how we got together. And then, IRI has got some incredible structured data assets, which we also play with. And so Andrew also got excited, and we said, okay, let's get together and write a book.
Excellent. And that takes us very nicely to a couple of examples of how AI is already changing things. We hear a lot about its potential, but I think you've got plenty of examples of where it's already made a difference.
Okay, I'll give you a couple of areas where we see some significant impact of AI. If Ray, you and I have been on the block for a long time, and if you look back, in our own life, we spend a phenomenal amount of time analyzing the data And by the time, and now there's an explosion of data that is happening in the marketplace. So if you really define your job as somebody who's analyzing data and mining data to unearth insights, you can be here for a very long time analyzing data. And by the time you finish doing that, you're so exhausted mentally that your ability to come up with some nuggets of wisdom might be compromised. But this is where AI and machine learning comes and plays a fairly big role. I don't see them replacing human intelligence, but I certainly see them playing a very significant role augmenting human intelligence. And why am I saying that? I'm saying that because if you unleash the power of AI to do routine, repetitive work at scale, then it can actually do the work 24/7 without getting tired. And by the time you come back, it has actually distilled the data into something that you can look at and say, what is the so what and what is the now what that we need to do with the data. So to that extent, I see AI actually unleashing capacity which otherwise was being spent on doing a phenomenal amount of grunt work. And as a result, we researchers were struggling to actually unleash the creativity that was actually within us. So that's one big application, and we have done that over the last 3-4 years. And and all of us are familiar with the fight for resources, and my case is no different. I'm also fighting for resources, whether it is people or whether it is money. There is always a fight. Now, after having unleashed this technology, I can suddenly see that there is this renewed vigor and energy with people where they are saying, okay, listen, a lot of my dirty work has gone away, and now let me start adding value to the business. So that's one dimension of application. The other big application is, and as I was telling you earlier, is how do we identify trends before they actually manifest in the marketplace? And this is actually an absolutely fascinating area. The reason why I'm saying it is important to identify trends before they manifest in the marketplace is because by the time they manifest, it is probably too late to actually act on it. Because by the time you figure out what is the product idea, what is the communication idea, design it, test it, launch it, it might be a bit too late. Small, nimble organizations are much faster at jumping onto a trend than large corporations. So for large corporations, you need to actually identify them before they actually manifest. And that's where we have used the power of AI and machine learning by mining stuff that actually influences the subconscious mind to understand how the mind is likely to get influenced. And more importantly, how is that going to translate into trends in the marketplace? So if you want, I can actually give you an example of how we go about doing that, or a little bit more detail, but I leave that to you.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear a bit more detail. And then I've got a question to you about structures and organizations. So let's take an example of more detail of how you're going about.
Okay, the more detail is as follows. The starting hypothesis behind the whole work that we started doing with Dr. Pradeep was that human brain is actually influenced by the songs we listen to, the soaps that we watch, the movies that we watch, and the books that we read. Whether we like it or not, these things subliminally influence us. These things ruminate in your brain for a long time, and it results in you doing certain things unbeknown to you. Now the question is, how do you identify those factors that are actually influencing the human brain? The only way to do that is to go to the source, which is to look at the lyrics of the songs, look at the the dialogues in soap operas and movies and so on, and analyze them. Humanly impossible to do all that. And that's where machine learning and AI comes in. So you just take all the scripts of soaps and movies and lyrics of songs and magazines and books and stuff like that, and feed it into this beast, and it actually starts analyzing it and starts looking for patterns. Now, needless to say, it will start identifying 1,000 patterns, and can you make sense out of it? Obviously no. And then more importantly, you don't know which of those patterns that the machine spits out are relevant for your brand, which is where you need to bring in two other data sources. One data source is all about what your brand stands for, and the other data source is all around understanding of the target market through traditional research work that we have done. And when you put these three things into the blender, it spits out actually two different outputs. One is metaphors, and we know that metaphors are the way people process information. So if I give a metaphor, then that triggers a series of thoughts in your mind. So it identifies metaphors that are relevant for the brand. The second thing that it identifies is, possible areas where you can do product innovation or communication innovation or packaging innovation. It is not a prescriptive thing. It gives you possible areas that you could actually look at. And that's where human judgment comes in. You look at those things, and then the brand very well as a insights person or as a marketer. Look at those ideas generated. Look at what the brand stands for. Look at what motivates your consumers. Put them all together. Look at them. And when your brain is actually not tired after looking at all the songs, lyrics, and so on, you are actually getting processed information. And then make some conscious choices on, listen, these are the areas that I would like to pursue. And then after that, the traditional research kicks in. You might convert it into a product idea or a packaging idea, and you might want to go out and test it and see if that actually resonates. And that has been applied a few times internally over the last 2 years, I would say, with some pretty innovative ideas that came out, which raised a lot of eyebrows within the company. Initially, people looked at it and said, that's counterintuitive. And then when we actually started, playing with it a little bit more, people started falling in love with it. And in fact, one of them is actually launched in the marketplace.
Super. Now, you mentioned being agile. Now, one of the downsides of we move into these technologies and we get groups of Python programmers and they're working in scrums is that the IT edifice can become really quite clunky in terms of being able to make a management decision, because you'll hear people say, oh, well, we want to build the knowledge engine, we want to do the trained machine learning. How do you make sure that we stay agile and that the purpose of the project is the outcomes as opposed to the purpose of the project being the IT project?
No, you're so spot on, Ray, because if you start off with the assumption that the machine is going to spit a fully baked solution, then you're abdicating your responsibility as a human being. The way I look at it is, this is something that augments intelligence. In fact, my placeholder definition for AI is augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. To me, machine learning and AI are things that will help you to identify patterns which human brains can find out, but it'll take a long time. And it does that, but then the so what and the now what is something that cannot be delegated to a machine. It has to be a human interference. And that's where, the human creativity kicks in. And that's where, your business judgment, your experience, all that comes in. And I've seen this time and again, if applied correctly, this can be a force multiplier.
Super. Now we're getting some really good questions coming in, but as I said, we're going to tackle those at the end. So please do keep putting them in as we go through. And this builds us now quite nicely onto the second of these questions. So the key opportunities and threats, let's take them separately. Let's do the threats first, because then we can do the opportunities, which is nicer. We'll do the sugar second.
Yeah. I think, for me, the biggest threat is to assume that this will automatically spit out the answers to all questions that you have in life. The day we make that assumption, I think this is going to be a disaster in my view. Yes, artificial intelligence is a learning system. It gets better and better. But I also strongly believe that human ingenuity and creativity is limitless. So every time the AI gets better, I always look at that as an opportunity for the humans to become even better. So, but then if you actually lapse back into, let's say, a period a year ago, then you may say that, this is actually spitting out solution that I used to do a year ago. Therefore, this has arrived and I will take everything that the machine says. The day we say that, then we are doing injustice to the technology, and more importantly, we are doing injustice to ourselves. So the biggest threat is to assume that this can solve all the problems. It is an enabler for solving problems. It is an enabler for making us look smarter and take better decisions. So that to me is a bigger threat. And I think, if you are not careful, you can easily lapse into a system where, you're actually thinking that machines will solve all the problems in this world.
And the opportunities?
The opportunities, the flip side of that is exactly the opportunity. I think, if you really have to, we as insights professional, we always complain saying that we don't necessarily get the rightful place at the table. And my answer to that is, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And so if you don't want to be on the menu, the big opportunity is how can we use the technology to be somebody who can land up in a meeting room and inspire and provoke people in a way they never thought insights people were capable of provoking. And that's the biggest opportunity I see of machine learning and AI.
I wonder as well whether it may, with some stakeholders, increase the credibility for the insights team to say, yes, we have done some research, we've done some cultural analysis, and the artificial intelligence has been run, and all three agree that this is what you should be doing. It may add some extra credibility in that process.
At least for the next 2-3 years, it will surely add a bit of credibility. If you say that, we have also run it through an AI engine, then people will say, oh, this must be good. So, I would do that. I would use that selectively, but again, I would always position it as, it's augmented by intelligence, and it has processed this amount of data in this short period of time, and therefore I could come up with an answer so quickly. That's the way I would position it, rather than saying the machine spitted out the answers and here are the answers.
Absolutely.
Then we are by definition, we are making ourselves redundant.
So a lot of these questions are actually, for those people listening, very closely tied into things you can read in the book. And in terms of things that are in the book, you've got some specifics. So how could we be using AI with customer satisfaction, with brand tracking, and with product name creation?
Mm-hmm. So, all these three can be done. Besides many other things, it can be done with leveraging AI. I'll give you a couple of examples of how we have leveraged AI for customer satisfaction. So we do get more than 15 million calls coming into our care lines, every year. And a lot of them, when I say calls, this is either voice calls or, digital reach outs. Now, roughly half of them are digital reach outs. Now, the best way to handle the digital people who talk to us digitally, you can have an army of people sitting there and, typing out responses, or you can completely delegate it to a machine. And a lot of us would have got frustrated by the fact that when the machine starts responding, it will give you some stupid answers because the chatbots are learning. What we have done is actually cleverly combine the human intelligence with the machine intelligence. So what the machine does is it reads the question, it gives you 3 or 4 possible answers you can give. And then the person who's in front of the machine picks and chooses the response that he or she thinks is the right one, edits it appropriately, and then pushes it out. Now, all that it did was it dramatically increased the quality of response and the speed at which the response could be provided, and more importantly, the quantum of queries that could be handled by any one individual went up exponentially. Now, lo and behold, at the end of it, people feel that they're not talking to a machine, and more importantly, they're actually getting answers that are very high quality. And you're not eliminated jobs. It's just that, the number of calls keeps increasing and you can do more with the same number of resources. Now, that to me is a very good example of how AI and machine learning, and it basically learns from the edits that you have done, and then it keeps improving the quality of responses it gives over a period of time. And that to me is a really good application of machine learning to dramatically enhance customer satisfaction. Now, brand tracking, this is a slightly tricky one. I would be lying if I tell you that machine learning and AI can potentially replace brand tracking completely. I think it is not there as yet. Maybe it might happen in the next couple of years, but right now, at least to the best of my knowledge, it is not there. But there are things that it can do which will help you to stay on top of how the brand is performing in the marketplace uh, through relatively simple machine learning based techniques to understand not just the sentiments that can be tracked. Sentiment tracking is old news, it's 10-year-old news, but actually processing that information in a way in which we can create triggers to understand what is happening in terms of trend. Is it likely to, has it crossed the tipping point, or is it on the way down? Particularly, when it comes to, with now that everybody has got a smartphone, every consumer has become a publisher. And people do post good things and bad things about brands. Now, some of those bad things could be well informed, some of them might not be well informed. Now, some of the things that are not necessarily good things about the brand get phenomenal traction, just as fake news get traction, just as bad news get traction. Bad news about brand also gets traction, and they take off. The big question that most manufacturers have is, should I respond or not respond? And that is exactly where machine learning comes into play in a big way. Because sometimes if you respond, you are actually aggravating the situation and it becomes much worse. But the question is, how do you decide when to respond, when not to respond? And that's where, as a company which has got hundreds of brands globally, we've got some really good analytics that tells us that, listen, if it has hit this level of velocity, if it has reached this level of absolute score, then it is probably getting close to the tipping point. You need to respond now. But if the numbers are a little bit different, then we say, okay, let it die. This one will die before we know it will die. So those kind of big strategic decisions, we are able to get it right 70, 80% of the time. Of course, things do go wrong when you don't respond, and it can blow out of proportion. But if we're getting it 70, 80% of the time right, instead of responding to everyone, if you get it right and don't respond to some of them, you can actually save yourself a ton of money and anxiety. So it's a different kind of brand tracking, but it is a tracking that is actually becoming more and more relevant in a socially connected world. Product name creation, I talked about it earlier on, which is all based on, what are the trends that are likely to emerge. All the way from product ideas to, possible names, you can create it through machine learning. And there are quite a few interesting case studies on some of the product that have not yet been launched, but it actually gives you some really good insights. Things that would have taken otherwise 8 to 10 weeks can be done relatively quickly now.
Splendid. So we had a great presentation last week from Mr. Takahashi at Nissan about a challenge for how market research agencies might look in the future. And this ties together really well with that. What would an AI-enabled market research organization look like?
When you say market research organization, are you looking at a client side or an agency side?
No, here an agency side. So what would an agency side organization that was really looking to leverage AI? Now, one of the questions is, should they have separate AI if they're supplying a service to Unilever? Is it a separate system? Are they working with your systems? Are they an input to your systems?
Yeah.
There's so many possibilities.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I think I don't think there's one perfect model here, but then I'm almost thinking that this is going to become mainstream. It's a question of time. Machine learning and AI is going to become mainstream. So how do we prepare ourselves for that is the first question that if I was running a research agency, I would be asking myself. So the most important thing for that is to hire the right kind of people, who know this domain well. Because it's the people who make these things happen. So, I would, if I was running a research agency, I would be looking at it and saying, okay, if 10% of my people are going to retire in the next 3 years, I would replace them with high-end machine learning experts. And if I don't do that today, I run the risk of, creating an organization that might not be fit for the future. So I would surely do that. I think I would hire the right kind of people. The second thing is, after you hire the right kind of people, what do you do? I think the first and foremost thing that I would do is I totally understand that there is a legacy business that we all have, whether a client side or agency side, we all have legacy business. But then how can I direct these new people that I'm hiring to look at my legacy systems that I have and ask two fundamental questions. One, how can I add value to that data so that the legacy systems suddenly get a new shot in the arm? And number two is, can I disrupt myself before somebody else disrupts my legacy system? So those are two questions that I would challenge them with. And the second question is something that I would do in a phased manner. But the first one is where I would put a lot of time and effort to make sure that my legacy systems are given a shot in the arm using machine learning techniques so that they actually become a lot more predictive and they become a lot more learning system.
Now, this question applies to people in client organizations, it applies to agencies, it applies to people in universities. Yeah. How should people prepare for this journey?
Okay. This might be a little bit of a unpleasant answer, but I would most certainly and earnestly urge everyone to actually start taking some basic coding classes. I am not expecting everyone to be a master coder, but having deep appreciation of coding is actually very important, because at least once you have an appreciation of what coding is all about, your ability to ask the right questions increases exponentially. Just to give you an analogy, if you go back 20 years ago, and if you wanted to get into market research industry, you had to know how to do significant testing. And a lot of us have done significant testing with paper and pencil back in the days when we started. Now, is that skill a relevant skill today with, with all kinds of software that can do significant testing? It is probably not a relevant skill. But if you do not understand what it means to do significant testing, your ability to interpret the data is also compromised, and you might not be able to talk with certain level of confidence. And today, coding is in exactly the same stage. If you appreciate coding, your ability to converse with the machine learning expert that you're going to hire in the company to ask them the right questions and push them in the right direction is going to be dramatically different. And therefore, I would say, learn coding early on. And I can tell you, it is never too late. I've been in the industry for 36 years. I decided to learn coding. I would not certainly classify myself as the world's best coder, but I certainly know enough to be dangerous.
Excellent. Yes. And now this is something that you and I have talked about before, the speed of this change. I think we have complete agreement that the change is happening. So is it going to be a regular evolution, or are we seeing accelerated evolution? Is it a revolution, or is it something completely different?
Yeah. My answer to the question is very simple, Ray. The pace of change will never be this slow ever again. So get ready for an accelerated journey.
I think you're right. And it's one of the curious advantages I find of being older, in that when I work with a lot of 23, 24, 25-year-olds, they will tell me, oh, the world has changed more than you can understand, Ray. And now it's going to be like this forever. And I say, no, it's changed a lot, and it's going to keep changing.
It is. Change is the only thing that is constant.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stan. We've got a shed load of questions, and if you are quick out there in listening land, you can type in some more. So I'm going to go to them and try to put them into groups.
You chose the questions, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the first questions are all around. Actually, there's a really straightforward question. So we'll start with that first. Are Unilever looking for help from third parties? And in particular, what sort of things are you looking for, and who should people approach? Should they approach the teams locally or whatever?
Yeah. Now, Stuart, we don't build this capability in-house because we don't see that as our business. but we see these as technologies that we are constantly looking at. And again, we're not all in with any one provider either. So we are constantly looking for technologies that suit a particular issue or challenge that we are facing at a particular point of time. So the short answer is we will always be looking for new innovative people who come up with great ideas.
And probably one opportunity and one threat for anybody out there who is a provider is that it's quite likely that something that is a great solution in 2019 may be out of date and not applicable in 2020. So yes. People should not look to make their money back over 5 years.
Yep, absolutely right. Yeah.
Now, in terms of Dr. Pradeep's technique, do you know what sort of AI that is? Is it supervised machine learning, unsupervised machine learning?
No, it is a unsupervised machine learning, but you supervise the output, not the learning process that it goes through, because it has to plow through a ton of data. I think the one of the ideas that came out, which was actually commercially launched, was ice cream for breakfast. Yeah. And that came out of analysis of lyrics of songs over the last 10 years. Now, I can sit here and talk for an hour on that whole thing and how we ended up with ice cream for breakfast. People looked at it and said, ice cream for breakfast? And then somebody else in the company said, if you can have donuts for breakfast, why not ice cream for breakfast? And then, it got a little bit more. Then they suddenly landed up as a flavor variant, Cocoa Loops, Ben and Jerry's. Yeah. So there were a few breakfast cereal flavored ice creams that were launched, and it actually created a fair amount of excitement. And to the extent that I think, when your competitors steal the idea, then you know that you got an idea. Now, we got two other ice cream manufacturers having breakfast ice cream, and they launched a year after we launched.
So we had 2 or 3 people, in fact 3, asking around the lyrics question. So effectively, you gathered the lyrics, used unsupervised machine learning, and then smart people to interpret that information.
Correct.
Now, there's an interesting point around one of those questions here, which I think I'll be I'm really interested to hear what your answer is going to be, because I've got my own opinion on this one. So when you're looking at this information and you're extracting these memes, how do you identify future trends from existing behavior from fads?
I don't know whether I understood that question.
Okay, so some things, you may be looking at them and actually they're already common behaviors. Yeah. Or you're looking at something and it's an indicator of a major trend for the future.
Yeah.
Or you're looking at something and it's like the hula hoop. It's going to be big this year and disappear.
Yeah.
How do you separate these sorts of things out?
Correct. Yeah. No, I think, what you're looking for is, things that are at a fundamental level influencing humans. I'll give you a simple example. If you read through lyrics of any of the rap songs, they usually are a social commentary on pent-up anger. Yeah. And then that pent-up anger has got multiple dimensions, and you can understand what are the dimensions that are actually creating that pent-up anger among consumers. Now, if you start spotting themes, then you know that this is something that is likely to result in a certain types of behavior out there. If those kind of songs are becoming more and more popular, then you know that is likely to be a trend that is likely to happen, and it will continue for some time. That's where human judgment comes in. If it is a trend that you look at it and say, this smells like a fad, this might die very quickly. Or if it is a deep-rooted anger that is being communicated through a rap song, you know that this is not going to go away because that's a reflection of the social commentary. Then you start looking at it and saying, what do I do with it? Is there a marketing opportunity? Or is that something that, I just pass because it is too sensitive? But those are the kind of calls that, as human beings we have to make. I just gave rap as an example, but then there are so many other genres of songs and movies which actually influence trends. And I think, there's a lady whose name sounds very Indian, but, I can tell you that, Bollywood movies always set trends for the next decade. And not all movies set. A lot of the movies are reflection of current reality, but there are quite a few movies which set trends, which then last for, the next decade. Now, identifying those trends is the one that will help you to ride the trend for 10 years very seamlessly. This lady who's asked that question, I'm happy to have a separate conversation with her about the trends that have been spawned by Bollywood movies. Now, can we watch all the movies? No. Then you need to have something to watch it and make sense out of it.
Absolutely. And I would add into that, of course, the whole of Unilever isn't a passive receiver of information. That if you give them, here are opportunities, here are things that are happening in society, your product innovators, your marketers will then create a trend from a fad.
Exactly.
Given the right opportunity.
Exactly. I still remember, back in my days at Coke, when we wanted to understand how fashion trends are set. So at one point, we did have a conversation with, Armani, and we asked him, how do you know that 3 years from now, it is going to be the year of white color? And he said, I don't know. But I am going to do white and I will set the trend. And that, therefore, understanding who those key people are, what is the level of influence they have, and what are they talking about today is usually a good indication of what is likely to happen 2 or 3 years down the road. So, but if you ask an average person, what do you think is going to be the color 3 years from today? They will never know. If you tell them it is going to be white, they'll say, really? I don't think so. But then big guy comes up with an idea, pushes it down, has got credibility, it becomes trend. The question is, how do you listen to what the big guy is saying today?
So you've covered this to some extent, Stan, but let's see if we can flesh it out a little bit more. So what are the most critical capabilities that the humans need to be able to run this process? You've talked about not expecting it to do everything for you, to have some appreciation of coding.
Yeah.
But what about steering this process?
What about?
Steering, providing some direction.
Providing. I think one of the most important skill that we all need to develop, and any amount of skill that we have is not enough because we can keep improving, is the ability to connect dots. If we can't see a pattern, because these things spit out a lot of stuff. They spit out a lot of stuff. But then if you're not able to look at all those things and say, wow, I can see a pattern here. I can see, what I could do with that. So there's this whole notion of connecting the dots and telling a story is as important as, probably more important than just being an expert coder. Leave the coding to the nerds and the geeks, have appreciation for it, but connecting the dots and storytelling is what is going to differentiate us from, the researchers of 5 and 10 years ago.
And we're nearly running out of time. We've got a nice high-level question here. What are the biggest challenges facing today's marketers?
Wow, that's, I think the marketers today, I don't envy their position. I think the biggest challenge that they're facing is that the world of marketing is moving from mass marketing to mass customization to hyper-personalization. Now that transition is powered by data today. And when it is being powered by data, it actually makes their life incredibly complex. It is easy to articulate that you need to do hyper-personalization, but just take a step back and think about the complexity that it brings with it in terms of the amount of content that one has to produce. In good old days, you used to produce a 60-second TV ad, edit it down to 30, 20, and 10, put it on television, and watch the cash box ring. Gone are those days. Everybody wants things that are customized to their own needs and wants. Of course, they do watch television. It's still the big thing. But you look at what your behavior is on an e-commerce website. They customize the offering for you. When you buy something, it says people like you also bought these things. And that makes your whole shopping experience a little bit different. So the world of customization is here to stay. And that makes marketers' job amazingly difficult, amazingly difficult. The number of channels have multiplied. The number of ways in which you can connect with consumers has exponentially increased. The amount of data has dramatically increased. And the speed at which all these things need to be done, as I said earlier, it will never be this slow ever again. Given all this, if you want marketers to be creative on top of all this, that's a pretty daunting ask from them. And they're really going through that in a big way right now. And, it's an area that they have to adapt. And it'll be a wait, watch, and see. And that is true for researchers also, by the way.
And on that point, is one of the challenges for marketers. So if we look at what the IPA are saying, that the thing that most determines the success of a brand is the long-term emotional relationship.
Correct.
And nearly all of the mass customization has got attributes that you can measure with instant activation. So how does the marketer resist the temptation to just focus on the short term?
No, there are two schools of thought here, Ray. Some people say that the only thing that is certain in the long run is that you're dead. There are others who say that long term is a series of short term. But at the end of the day, the brands that have survived are the ones that have a clearly articulated purpose and emotional connect with consumers. Now, that is the reason why, in this data-rich world, the temptation is to actually do a lot of, dribs and drabs here and there, and that could potentially cause damage to the brand, which is where, the need for visionary marketers is now more important than ever before. I mean, when I look at, our own stable of brands, our incredibly strong, emotionally connected brand is Dove, is one of the many strong brands, but Dove is an incredibly strong brand because the owner of the brand is maniacally focused on what the brand stands for. And, he drives it, diligently day in and day out. And that's what creates a very, very strong brand. And its equity year after year keeps growing. Its sales year after year keeps growing. And variants launched stick. So what IPA is saying is 100% true. If you do not have emotional connect between your brand and the consumers, you can kiss the brand goodbye. Somebody else will give you a better functional benefit at a lower price. It's a question of time.
So to summarize, really, all of this AI for marketing and product innovation should be seen as a tool to improve brand managers. So more people can be like the Dove manager, not so we have more machines, really.
No, you need that. That's what I'm saying. I would never, ever take the humans out of the equation. If somebody thinks that AI is going to do marketing, it's not going to happen.
Okay, well, we've got through most of the questions, not quite all of them, I'm afraid, but we have hit the time buffers. So thank you, Stan, for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And that's the end of the broadcast for today.
Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you.
A pleasure.